All right, Kelly, second HR Heretics segment of the week. This time we're going to talk about Rippling banning former employees from taking part in a secondary event. So let me break this down and then I want your take. So Rippling has a very privileged position right now to where they have a ton of investor interest to want to own part of their company. And the founders have decided that the company is capitalized enough and they don't want to give up more of their equity. And so they're doing something that is, I would say, increasingly rare, especially in the last couple of years, not as rare, going back in tech history, to where they're going to offer current employees to be able to sell their equity in a secondary. And so now investors can come in and buy more equity and everyone's happy. Well, normally when companies do this, they typically only allow current employees to take part. And Rippling has so much demand that they've decided to allow ex-employees to sell as well. Now, the wrinkle here, and this is something I've never seen before, is that they are banning ex-employees who work at competitors from participating in the event. So what's your take?
Yeah. First of all, I love tender offers or secondaries, which are synonymous, right? Tender offer equals a secondary.
Yeah.
Same thing. I think it's a great way to, allow, especially long-time employees, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, extract liquidity and reward them without, them having to jump ship and go to another company, so to speak. So that's good. A lot of folks also cap them, right, Nolan? Like if you're here 5 years, we do a secondary. We don't want you to dump all of your shares and leave the company. They'll cap you, right? Like you can sell 25% of your vested shares.
That's actually exactly what they're doing in this case.
Right. I've been a part of a couple secondaries, both at GitHub back in, I think, 2015. And Pendo offered one a few years ago, which I was too new to partake in, but saw the process. And this is the first time I've actually heard no ex-employees, period, because I was an ex-employee at GitHub when I participated, and I know Pendo extended this to ex-employees. So I think that's interesting.
Those two companies have a lot of demand, by the way, right? You've worked at like marquee companies
Correct.
That have a lot of, and that's typically why you don't see ex-employees take part.
Right. So now to even cut that even further to say yes, ex-employees and not competitors, that seems like a huge undertaking, first of all, and just a lot. So I've never seen that before, Nolan.
So let me tell you what the company's saying about that.
Yep.
The company's saying, well, look, Kelly, as part of running a secondary and when we provide liquidity to people, the SEC requires us to disclose confidential information to people that are taking place in the secondary. So an example of that information would be revenue. And so Rippling, their main competitors like Deal. And so if you were at Rippling and now you're at Deal and, we let you take part in this, we have to give you our most up-to-date revenue information. And you're probably going to tell your CEO at Deal what our current revenue is, and we don't want that. That's what they're saying.
Yes, which I think is completely logical. Now, going around picking and pulling, that is, I think David said it in LinkedIn, that is quite the exercise to go ex-employee back ex-employee and discern where they're at. Now, the other thing I would say, again, maybe cynical, will people tell other people anyway this information, right?
Absolutely.
People are friends,
they already know
et cetera.
It. Exactly. Yeah.
We've said this, that people talk all the time, so there's that. However, I do understand leading with, we're not doing this for this reason. I just can't help think the real talk under it is some kind of you're with a competitor. We're gonna pull this benefit back from you. That has to be a part of it. And like we said earlier, both things can probably be true. I just think maybe one of them is being said publicly.
Oh, for sure. So here's my take.
Fine. They can make their own rules, dude. Again.
So for those of you who don't know Parker Conrad, he was also the CEO of Zenefits, which has a pretty checkered past. And Parker is known for being ruthless. He is a ruthless business person. And look, I totally understand what the company is saying, which is we don't want this data to get into our competitors' hands. Here's the reality that everyone who works at this stage knows. All of these investors talk. Everybody knows what the company metrics are when you're working at a competitor, even if it's a private company. Those are not state secrets. Everyone knows. The second thing I'll say is like, when I first saw this, my initial thought was like super spiteful, vengeful, like unnecessary. And then as I started thinking about it, I'm like, well, there is a zero-sum aspect to business. And specifically, I gave this example on LinkedIn of sales to where like, if I'm an account executive at Rippling and I sold $1 million in business last year, and now I'm at deal, the first thing I'm doing is I'm calling that book of business and I'm saying, hey, I've picked the winner. And here's why deal is way better than Rippling. And here's why you should bring your business over here. And so, I think two things, as we mentioned, can be true here. Like it probably is best for the business to not include this. It's probably also very like spiteful and dare I say childish. But I think it also sends a very clear message to current and future employees, which is we are a hot company. Investors want a bigger piece of us. But if you go work for a competitor, you're on the blacklist and you're not going to receive any of the benefits of the people who are on our team.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a clear takeaway from my perspective. On the other side, I think that being careful not to put too many calories into like protecting, into all these things, right? We hear this all the time. Just focus on us. Forget about what's going on. We're going to win. And I think that we know that people talk, and I think it's a little naive not to think that somehow, some way, this information they might not want in these employees' hands or brains is going to find their way there. So like, I'd be like, look, it's probably going to happen anyway. Let's open it up. Let's keep going. I mean, who knows? Maybe some of these employees are wonderful and they're boomerang and now they'll never come back and they're amazing fucking talent. So I don't know the story, but
Sure.
I would just probably ache on like, let's not be petty. Shit's going to happen no matter what. Let's keep moving forward and focus. And the other thing I will say, and you'll probably disagree, we've talked about this with exercise windows, right? The whole 90-day only to exercise. I'm a big fan of, hey, they were there for a period of time. They worked their ass off, presumably. They helped build it. They kind of deserve any value that's come of that, considering and assuming that value is lagging with the work people do before these events happen. So,
well, they're going to get the value. It's just they have to wait until there's a M&A.
They have to wait,
event.
but like, what if it goes to shit before then? We talked with Colleen. It's all monopoly money.
Yeah. So let's talk about the future of now that this genie is out of the bottle. Like, here's what I think is going to happen. I think other CEOs are going to see this. And I think if we start to enter another era of good times in which there are more secondaries for companies like Rippling, I think you're going to see CEOs institute this policy.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Here's a crazy stat. Between hybrid and frontline employees, about 80% don't typically work in an office. So it's no surprise that digitally engaging employees is the #1 concern for CEOs as companies go hybrid. But as hybrid is quickly becoming the norm, it's easy for workplaces to start feeling a little less human. Yet delighting a digital workforce is possible, and it can even be, dare we say, fun. That's where Workvivo, Zoom's employee experience platform, comes in. If you've ever recoiled at the thought of a static intranet that looks like something you built in 1995 using MS Paint, have no fear. Workvivo is a dynamic, intuitive, accessible, and mobile-first tool. People actually like using it, which is why companies like Ryanair, Dollar General, Virgin, and more have rolled it out to hundreds of thousands of employees. Workvivo's activity feeds, spaces, shoutouts, and live streams, among other features, help elevate the employee experience like never before. The result? Dramatically better retention, productivity, and most importantly, connectedness. A greater sense of the belonging we all crave at work, whether we sit at a desk or drive a truck. Make Workvivo the digital heart of your organization and achieve limitless human connection. Head to workvivo.com to book a demo and make sure you tell them that Nolan and Kelli from HR Heretics sent you.
So my team is very well versed in equity. It's really important for me for them to understand how equity works. And we had a really good company-wide debate yesterday at our culture call. And shout out to Cam, who's one of our engineers, who was like, I think this should be illegal. And I was like, Cam, it's a private company, man. Like, they can do whatever they want. And he was like, just because they can do it doesn't mean they should be allowed to do it. And if it was a public company, like, you can't restrict an ex-employee who now works at a competitor from selling their RSUs. And I thought about that, and I think Cam's right. I think that this is an area that is currently not regulated because it hasn't been used before, that if we start to see this used more, should be looked at. Because we just had I think it was the FTC that came out and said, hey, no more, non-competes.
I was just going to bring that up, and we didn't even, we rarely.
And this is actually, I think, like a really more brutal form of a non-compete. Because it's kind of, it's like, that this is the policy, but it's not written down in your offer letter. I agree. So like, you're kind of like, gunned ahead of your financials. And look, most startup employees are not rich. Like totally. We did not come into this industry with money. We're in this industry to make money.
I don't like it. I think the pros are not as big as the cons. I just think it's kind of silly and naive, again, to think that you're protecting something through this and you're hurting so many more. I mean, families, things these people worked. Like, I think it is a more brutal form of that non-compete. And I love engineers because they usually think with first principles, and that's what he did. I forgot his name. You just said it. But
Cam's take was also like, look, what it should be is you pay me to not go work for another competitor. And so I was like, I don't know if that's ever going to happen.
Well, that's different, Cam. That's bribery. So let's talk about that later. But I think it's kind of silly. I mean, if I was the HR person, I'd be like, really? Like, you guys think this is going to, I think if they want to do it as a gut punch, that's up to the CEO. And that's a personality thing, which I think is probably underneath this a little bit. But with first principles, I'll say it again. It's the same with that exercise window thing that I hate so much. Give people what they've earned and deserved. And if this goes on, you're right. It could be so, I don't like you. You called me dumb 6 years ago. I'm like, you're not getting my secondary. I mean, we could take all forms of nuttiness. So that's my take.
Yep. So just to Steelman Rippling side, because I do want to make sure that they I don't love this policy, but I understand it. And I think that's an important piece in our job as podcasters, but also like in our job as HR people, is like, sometimes we're not going to agree with the business decision. And if I could just articulate their position just for people to understand, and at least just understand it, you don't have to agree with it, but understand. One, it is a zero-sum game. Your HRS is going to be on Rippling or it's going to be on Deal. Two, we don't have to let anybody take part in a secondary event, and we are. Three, we want to send a very clear message to current and future employees that if you go and work for a competitor, because you can't just go work for a competitor and be like, oh, I don't have any secrets. Like, you come with secrets, like you do. It's just the way that it is. But if you go and work for that competitor, then you're on our blacklist and you're against us. And again, we may not agree with that statement. We may not agree with like the way that they're thinking about this policy, but I think it's a fair decision to make, and I understand it. I wouldn't do it myself.
Yeah. I mean, the goal of this podcast is to understand all angles of everything. Right. And I like Rippling. I almost went there in 2016. Probably,
wow.
should have, but I like the company. And I think the bigger point, Nolan, is this is different and new. We talk about people just doing the same old thing because they've done it.
Yeah.
This is different and it's interesting. And I think it's important for people to be aware of it.
We'll see how the experiment plays out. All right, everybody, please like, subscribe, share. Let us know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you later.